Do you approach your capital raising differently if you're talking to a retail investor versus a family office, or a broker dealer, or just depending on the type of investors that you're attracting? Does your strategy change at all?
It does and it does not. That's a great question. And so let me break that down a little bit. The biggest mistake that I always see people make when they're starting to raise capital, if they're new at the game, is they don't understand that building trust takes time. And so you'll meet somebody that has a considerable amount of wealth, and you'll start talking about your deal, or you'll start talking about your big idea, typically on the very first and sometimes in the second call or the second meeting. And usually what happens, and this is why a lot of people really struggle to raise capital, it's kind of like they're on a treadmill, and I break it down and they say, man, we're talking to a lot of people, we're just not closing anybody. What's happening is the other person will say something like, Dan, send me the information. It sounds like it's a pretty interesting deal, but they're saying it really more out of respect, and because that's just the natural progression of events. And so you send them everything, you follow up, but then you don't close. And what that person is really subconsciously saying is, you did not give me enough time on the front end of this relationship to really get to know you. Don't know your values, don't really know that you'll treat me as a fiduciary. Had you invested more time up front, I'd be much more inclined to be moving forward in this process with you. But here's the difference. Retail investors, like the doctors, the entrepreneurs, the business owners, while they might be sophisticated and accredited, they're not professional, meaning they're not a family office. They're not an institution like a pension fund. Those higher groups will do much greater amounts of due diligence. They're going to look for things within your business, like, do you have an accounting understanding, or do you have an apartment comptroller? Do you have compliance? Do you have investor relations? And in the industry, there are actually firms that are set up that do conduct professional due diligence, like my friends at McElroy or at FactRight or at Buttonwood. And these are third-party due diligence firms that are engaged often enough by the family offices or by the broker dealers that'll come in and really do a deep dive on you and your company, where they'll do things like LexisNexis background checks. They'll check basically for prior bankruptcies or things like that, because you have to realize in the securities business, an omission of something that is a material fact is just as bad as basically fraud, because if by omitting that material fact would have induced an investor to make a different decision, it ain't a good thing. Right. So what they try to do in this due diligence process is really learn as much about you, Brandon and Mauricio, as they can, either through that due diligence process that is pushed out to third-party firms, or in a much, much deeper dive. Whenever we work with family offices or larger groups, we literally walk in, or we send them access to a Dropbox file that goes much, much deeper than just a PPM, a pitch deck, and a one-pager. It's got things like articles of incorporation, bios on the key principal, copy of our key man coverage, assuming you have that, all of these other things that these larger groups would want to see, because I've been doing this long enough now to know exactly what they look for, and we want to give all that to them right up front so that they don't have to continually be coming back to us and asking every couple days.
So if you enjoyed this clip and you want to see the entire episode, click here. And if you want to see other videos similar to this, click here.